about 2, 3 years old, my father nearly killed my mother. So he stabbed her behind the ear. I don't have any memories of my father growing up. We bounced around a lot. We moved all the time. We were in different schools, different houses, different apartments, different communities. But you begin to develop this perception of what life is supposed to be, what relationships are supposed to be. She would grab me by my face a lot, slamming heads against the wall, 6, 7, or 8 guys, and they're all passing a blunt around the room. And my sister wouldn't have been older than 11 years old, but she's smoking weed with all these adults. It was crazy. So when I met this guy and I got to go to his house, he was like a savior. He was like my best friend all of a sudden, you know? He lived in like a big studio apartment. The first weekend going up there, we got pizza and pop and energy drinks. We could cuss and say whatever the hell we wanted to do. It became an every weekend thing. I would go to his house probably 45 out of 52 weekends of the year. I had no idea what happened to my mom. I had no communication with her, being manipulated by a pedophile. Suffering builds endurance, endurance builds character, and character inspires hope.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Are You Listening podcast. I'm your host, Gerard White, and I have a guest on today that has a powerful story. We had the honor of meeting each other at America Fest, and when I met this brother, I knew that his story was so raw and so powerful that whatever I could do to help bring awareness to it, to further the voice, to add an echo to what he has to say, his story, I had to do. So we set it up, and Seth Gehle is who our guest is. But before we get into that, I would just want to take a brief moment to let everybody know that Seth's story is a heavy story. It's a heavy topic. And unfortunately, this is something that does affect a lot of children, a lot of people throughout. So there's going to be some conversations. There's going to be some words that might not be the normal conversations or words that we use on the podcast, but we're blessed to have Seth to come on, share his testimony the way that he shares his testimony, to speak the way that he speaks, because we know that when he does, there's power behind it, and it's going to resonate, and it's going to help somebody in some situation. So before we dive into that and we introduce Seth fully, I just want to say, if you guys want to support the show, you want to support the brand, the best way to go is to go to standupnowapparel.com. We have the boldest patriotic and Christian apparel out there. It's just a great way to express your faith, stand up for God and country, and to rock some awesome merch and really just give back. You can use a promo code listening. First time customers, you'll save a discount on that. So without further ado, me going on, I'm excited to announce to the show Seth Gehle. He is a military veteran. He's now a published author. And to be honest with you, he's a survivor. That's really what he is. He's a survivor. And Seth, welcome to the show, brother. I'm excited to have you on and just share your story. Your title of your book, Strength Beyond the Shadows, right? Strength. And no doubt about it, you're strong to be able to not just go through what you went through, but to share it. That, I think, takes more strength than going through it, because a lot of people go through this. And I don't want to dive into your story. I'm going to let you tell it, but I just wanted to give you accolades in that for the strength. And look at you. You got big shoulders. You got big arms, right? You're a strong guy. You could tell, you're in the military, and I know you run 100-mile races, which blows my mind. I can't even run like 5 miles, right? So props to you on that. But just to share your story and the strength that it takes, and I'm sure the healing that it's given you, and that is amazing. But welcome to the show, man. I'm excited to have you on and for you to share your story with the viewers, just to reach a few more ears and souls.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's always an honor and it's a pleasure to get to speak to anybody. So I don't take anything lightly. I don't take any of this for granted. Any opportunity to speak and share my story to help anybody gain any kind of insight, inspiration, motivation, freaking a little bit of untapped potential that they have not reached yet. Any opportunity I get to bring those things forward, it's always an honor. So thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. And from the book, you're a motivational speaker now. You go around. I mean, this is just a piece. I think this is like a tool, right? I think I've heard you say that, right? This is the tool that's kind of helped you share your story with others, for them to resonate. Healing tool, probably for you and for many others, and a building block for where you're going to go. And I would like to say how God is going to use you in your life. I just want to add that, but I know that this is awesome thing for you to get out there. So, yeah, if you just want to, your story is so powerful. And like I had mentioned to you off air, I resonated with a lot of it, in early childhood upbringing, lack of things in the household, lack of love, most importantly, right? That longing for that fatherly love of a father figure not in our household. And I think you just sharing that really resonated with me as that. And I know there's other parts of your story that's going to help and resonate with others. I think that's what's so powerful about sharing your story. I'm sure you probably get that every time you share it or speak, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. Before I started sharing my story, you kind of feel like you're special or like unique or um, that you're all alone. And we are all more alike than we are different, especially those of us who have gone through some challenging moments in life. There are so many more people out in this world that have gone through the same exact things that I have that it's really an ego check in a certain way because I used to be very like, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've been through. So like, you can't tell me anything. And, I just had this like inflated ego because of all of the suffering and pain that I'd been through. And once I started sharing my story, I realized like, once again, we are all more alike than we are different. There are so many more people out in this world that have gone through the same exact things, better or worse than I have, so we're all kind of going through this thing together, and it doesn't make any sense to put somebody down or to look down upon people because you have suffered more, as if suffering is some sort of accolade. It's
Mm,
not. um, I think what you do on the other end of suffering, you know is maybe worth talking about. I think the tragedy in life is not what we go through, but the untapped potential to live the most beautiful life that you can despite of those circumstances. And so that's kind of what I pulled from my story, is like, how much more tragic would my story be if I was sitting here as an addict, as a homeless person, addict or abusive or perpetuating the cycle, right? How much more tragic would that be? But the beauty in all of this, despite everything that I've been through, is that I'm a married man with a beautiful wife, two beautiful children. I've actually got a third baby on the way now. So, I'm just it's beautiful, man. Like my book is I'm a best-selling author, motivational speaker, competing in jiu-jitsu, freaking running races, winning awards at work. Like, I don't, all my accolades they're great for me, I guess, but the amount of pain and suffering that I've gone through is what makes me relatable, because so many people go through the same things, like I said, that I have. And so for me to be able to kind of prove to people that like, there is this path out, there is this way, there is this other side of life, there is this thing that you can achieve or accomplish if you choose to do so. Um, it's humbling. I don't even have the words for it at the moment. I've been looking for words for about a week or two, uh, given the position that I'm in, and I'm just trying to find the right things to say. Um, I'm lucky. I'm very, very lucky, and the opportunities presented themselves for me to succeed, and I had done the legwork ahead of time to make those things happen. And so, that's the intersection, where luck meets, that opportunity and hard work. When those two meet, you get lucky, and that's where I'm at right now. And so I'm just happy to be here, man. So
Yeah, and, I use a different word. I would say blessed, man. I really do. Like, is just seeing how there's so much of your story when and I know, like, and we talked about this at AmFest. I want to just put this out there, right? So when I met Seth and I was like, hey man, we had a booth right there, and he could instantly see from our apparel brand that we're a Christian patriotic brand. He's like, look, man, I want to tell you before I come on your show. I'm not a Christian. And I was like, okay, there's no problem with that. And he's like, okay, well, because I've had people not have me on their show or turn me away because I wasn't Christian. And I will say, said this to him, and I'll say it again now. If you call yourself a Christian and you turn somebody away that is not, you are the opposite of what a Christian stands for. That is the opposite of what it is. So in some things that I'll say, they might not be what Seth feels or the word choices that he uses. And this will show you how the perspective from one person that I am a believer. I would say a Christian, a believer, people of the way, I would say a lot of different things with that. I think Christian is a loosely used term today. But I know that Seth, in his story, in his testimony, is tapping into things that are written all throughout scripture. And those believers out there, you'll see it too. And if you're not a believer, I would encourage you to go to the word yourself and to find it, because like you are literally that suffering that you're going through um, prepared your way, and you are not allowing it to hold you back, to keep you in that bound down by sin and shame. You are using it as a strength. And then when you doing that, you have fell into community. And even as you share your story, you will see the points in your all throughout your life where you found community. And sometimes that community wasn't the right community. And there's predators within certain communities, but that community strengthens us. But when we're able to step out and tap in, then these blessings start to happen. And you said, like, you have a beautiful wife who stands beside you when even times, I know you shared, not to give up your story, where you didn't think that you were worthy of it, right? You have two children, a third one on the way. Congratulations on that. My wife's due any day with our third one, and they're a blessing, right? And as a child going through shame and hurt, to be able to give the real love that a child deserves that we didn't have, right, is just that's a blessing to you, I know, as a father, to be able to give something that you lacked early on. Like that probably is one of the best things happening in your life right now. So I just think that you're blessed, man, and God's got his hand on you. He's had his hand on your life the whole time, even when you're like horrible things happen. I mean, horrible things. People are like, how could you say that? How can you say that God, but I know personally, like that, if we don't go through a test, we will not have a testimony. And it's through the words of people's testimony that equips and encourages others to reach for their higher potential. And that's what you're doing with your story. And I think it is amazing what you're doing. And I don't want to continue to go on, but I want you to, tap into your story. I know people are like, tell us the story already, right? Like, what is
Yeah.
this we got? But I just want to tell you, there's so many signs of you tapping into the kingdom, what God's laid out, this kingdom environment, this kingdom power, and you are tapping into it, and God is using you 100-fold. And we'll find where that connects at the end of the story.
Yeah. So, um, not to delay any further,
Yeah.
but I will say, even though not being a Christian, there's a lot of things that I pull from the Bible, and a lot of lessons. And one of them is from, I don't know exactly the verse, but it's in Romans, and it's, suffering builds endurance, endurance builds character, and character inspires hope. And so that's kind of what I've begun to do through my story, right? This suffering that I've gone through, it's built this endurance in my body. Like I am able to endure, I am able to accomplish and get through and overcome. And by doing so, I inspire those who are either going through it or have gone through it and are finding and looking for that hope. So um, the suffering for me began really young. I was 5 years old, or excuse me, I was about 2, 3 years old. My father nearly killed my mother. So he stabbed her behind the ear, almost kills her. He goes to prison for an undetermined amount of time. I don't have any memories of my father growing up. So I have pictures of me and him as a baby, but I don't have any memories of my father. My earliest memory of my father is meeting him in prison when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, maybe 8 years old, and that's the earliest memory I have. I don't have any memories of throwing the football in the front yard, or eating breakfast together, or doing homework together. I don't have any of these like father son moments. My earliest memory is just meeting him in prison. And prior to that, my life had already kind of taken a bad turn. So, due to the circumstances of my mother being a single mother of 3 kids, because my father was in prison, we bounced around a lot. We moved all the time. We were in different schools, different houses, different apartments, different communities. There was nothing that was in our life that was stable or, consistent, right? There was nothing that was fixed. We were all over the place all the time. And with that comes a lot of challenges from children. I didn't have a father in my life. And so being at babysitters' houses, unfortunately, when I was about 5 years old, there was a babysitter who they had a teenage son who ended up molesting me, and in the realm of sexual abuse and molestation, that was, I would say, very mild.
Mhm.
Although not to diminish anything, right? Like anybody who goes through anything, it can really mess you up. But in the grand scheme of things, it was relatively mild. It was just a little bit of exposing of me to him and him to me, and a little bit of touching. And he was probably 16, 17 years old maybe. And I reported him to my grandparents. My grandparents addressed the family, and they did what most people do, which is denied it. They say, my kid wouldn't do that, my kid didn't do that. And then I don't remember it happening ever again from that kid moving forward. So after that, aside from that situation, the home life was just kind of like tumultuous, and just a lot of toxicity and chaos in the house every
Mhm.
day. My mom had several different boyfriends. She was always getting in fights with boyfriends. So we would come home and there was holes in the walls, there were broken glasses on the floor, and she would kind of be bragging to her kids that are 5, 6, and 7, or 4, 5, and 6, about how she had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend, and she punched him and he missed her and this and that. And so as a kid, you're kind of seeing all these things unfold in front of you, and you really don't know what to think of it. But you begin to develop this perception of what life is supposed to be, what relationships are supposed to be, and we continue growing, and life quickly begins to get out of hand. My mother, she had always drank and she had always smoked weed when we were young, and so we always saw those things around the house. Well, probably when I was around 7 or 8 years old, she started to get really out of hand, and she began to get more violent, physically. Kind of close hand striking, a lot of grabbing. She would grab me by my face a lot, slamming heads against the wall, yelling and screaming. There is a level of like disciplining your children, punishing your children, or even giving your children whoopings
Yeah.
that comes with like love or affection, or um, some sort of empathy behind it, right? Or your parent
Mhm.
spanks you and they say, "Hey, I love you. I'm sorry. Like, this is what I got to do sometimes." But when those things happen and there's no like love attached to it, and there's just rage and anger and violence,
It's
that
abuse.
I think that, yeah, exactly. That becomes
Yeah,
abuse,
that's the
right?
difference. There's a difference between discipline and then there's just flat out abuse where somebody's just letting out their aggression and anger on you because things in their life aren't well, right?
Right.
And I just want to, you said a few things I just want to tap into. So that was part of your story that I kind of resonated with, that toughness, home environment. Yours was definitely a little more escalated than mine. I will say that, but we also too bounced around a lot. I think I attended like 11 different schools going up till eighth grade, so always that
Yeah.
moving, not having constant friends, not knowing what's what. And then aggression pointed, was your aggression, I know you said you have two sisters. Did your mother equally share that aggression or abuse with your sisters as she did you, or was it more singled out towards you as the only male in the household other than her boyfriends who she was fighting with?
I was a really good kid. So thankfully, I mean, I say thankfully, it's probably a better word I could use. She was more aggressive towards my sisters than she
Mhm.
was I. I mean, they got into a lot more trouble than I did. I was a very well behaved kid.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just curious if there was something with that aspect because I know sometimes there it is singled out because maybe you resembled a father and she's not around or some male aspect. So she was abusive to you and your sisters. It wasn't like it was targeted. You guys were all in this together, this bad environment that you grew up in, and then you start to. Was there a point in your life where you knew that the lifestyle you were in was not normal? I know that was the case for me when I looked around, but did that happen to you, or did you think that the situation you were living in was what most people lived
No, man, that's a great question, and that's actually a there's a day specifically in my life that I remember that I talk about this, and I was 10 years old. I came home one day and I was walking up the stairs, and I remember looking into the living room, and my mother was in there with 6, 7, or 8 guys, and my older sister was in there, and they're all passing a blunt around the room. and my
Mm.
sister wouldn't have been older than 11 years old, and she's smoking weed with all these adults. That that day was the day that I went upstairs in my bedroom and I sat there and I said to myself, like, this is not going to be my life. I'm going to do something special with my life. I'm not going to be a statistic. Like, I don't know what is it. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is not going to be the life that I live. Like, I knew that my mom was getting out of hand. I knew that things were getting out of hand at home. I knew that I was living an adverse life, especially compared to probably most children. So I knew that one day I would tell my story. Basically, that I can remember that day being 10 years old, sitting in my room and having those thoughts.
Wow, early as 10 years old. I mean, I can relate to saying that I was probably around that same age, maybe 10, 11 years old, saying that the situation I'm in is not normal and I know that I can do better for myself. That led me to move out at a very young age. And your story really at 10 wasn't really I mean, for how bad it get for what comes, right? As I know your story, that was like the before it really got crazy, crazy. This was just the home environment where you were lacking the love, the attention. I know you said you had that early on, um, molestation that happened at one time, and it was something where it was more of an exposure and touching and to speak directly, that's what happened to me around the age of 6 years old. Right. So I can relate to that exactly. And it's not like you, it was only a one-time thing. For me personally, I know that that's where like a seed gets planted where like you're exposed to sexuality at like 5 and 6 years old. And it's like, this isn't normal. Like as a father now that have children that are older than me, I know that's not in their realm of understanding. But I know that when it was exposed to me at that young age, it was in my life, right? Was that the same case for you where because you had that molestation at an early age at 5, were there seeds of that was throughout your childhood?
Oh, dude, absolutely. I mean, I was exposed to porn, like full blown pornography at 5 years old. My mother, she worked all day. So me and my sisters would be at home alone, taking care of ourselves. And we ended up finding her porn collection, the VHS tapes. And so I remember sitting in the living room watching these videos. I don't remember what they were, but I know that it happened. And we had taken the tapes out in the neighborhood. We were showing the kids thinking it was funny. But yeah, we were fully exposed to porn, like full length tapes at 5, 6 years old. And then even when I was 10 years old, my mother gifted me my own porn to watch whenever I wanted to watch it because her argument was she knew that I was going to watch it anyways. So why not just give it to him? And so I had the DVD at 10 years old that I could just watch whenever I wanted. And I didn't realize it obviously at the moment, and I didn't even realize it until really recently. How detrimental that was to my young and developing brain. Because at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I was looking at girls and women in a particular way, that a young boy shouldn't even have any concept of, and I would look at people in a particular way, and I had fantasies and I had, a borderline addiction at 10 years old, 11 years old, So yeah, it
Wow.
was
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, 10 years old for your parent, and people are watching this, and as a parent, like, what type of parent would do this, right? And it seems like your mother was lost, right? Your mother was lost herself. She couldn't control her life. It sounds like, let alone her children, right? She raised them the right way. Yeah, that's so early. I mean, your kids. How old are your kids now? What was your oldest?
Mine are 4 and 6.
6. Yeah, my daughter's 9. There's no way that I would even think that is the right thing to do, right? So that kind of tells you the mindset around the home environment that you were in, right? In addition to the abuse, but to think that, hey, I'm going to give you this. And we did an episode on porn. Personally, um, I believe it's spiritual. I believe it's a spirit of lust, right? So when that spirit of lust, I believe there's multiple spirits on the earth, right? There's just God, there's the Holy Spirit, there's demonic spirits. You can read all throughout every religion there is, there's multiple gods, multiple spirits. I believe that lust, that first seed was put on at molestation, it planted that seed, it was attached to you, right? And then somehow this porn came up very early, right? Had this molestation not happened, probably this porn would not have came across your pathway. And then you were like enticed by it, right? Because you're already exposed. And then you're like, what is this? And at a young age, we're trying to like figure out who we are, what is life. We're questionable about stuff, natural curiosity, right? And then we go down this road and it's like it's there with us. It's attaching to us. And then it's like you said, these fantasies start to happen, these thoughts, these feelings, and we're young. We're like, where is this coming from? I do believe that that's a evil spirit that's kind of placed upon us, and that spirit grows and manifests and magnifies itself in our life. And I think that's as your story continues to progress, you see that demon growing more and more and more.
Yeah, it's crazy when I think about my story. I often forget to realize or don't recognize that even just at 10 years old, 11, 12 years old, what I had already gone through is enough to ruin somebody's life. And that's usually what happens is you grow up in a broken home and then your life is broken from that point forward. And my situation only got worse. So I end up, because of my home life, I found myself outside of the house a lot, hanging out with different friends. And I always had older friends or bigger friends because I was a tiny little kid and I got bullied a lot. And so I had bigger friends or older friends that would protect me. And I ended up meeting a kid. His name was Jacob. For the sake of the story, I'll say his name's Jacob. Fake name for him to protect his identity. But I meet Jacob. He lives around the corner from me. He was 15. I was 10. And Jacob kind of finds out that I have a jacked up life, and so he's kind of taking care of me, helping me out. And I start hanging out with him. I'm hanging out with him for probably about a month or two. And I'm over at his house one day, and this man walks in the front door. This man is 6'5", 6'6", 380 pounds, big, big, wide guy. He's Hispanic, but he's very pale. And he's got like the Dahmer, like aviator style glasses on. He's got long, black, slick back hair. Very big guy, very big hands. Wearing a big red t-shirt, some athletic shorts. And he walks in the house, and the first thing he says to me is, "Hey, what's your name?" "Well, I'm Seth. Who are you?" His name was Mondo. And he says, "Well, I'm Jacob's friend. Do you like video games?" "Yes." "Do you like pizza?" "Yeah, I love pizza." "Well, do you like the Buckeyes? You like football?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love football. I grew up in Northwest Ohio, so I was a Buckeye fan." Um, he's like, "Oh, cool. Well, why don't you come up to my house this weekend with me and Jacob, and we'll play video games?" And so I was like, all right, well, let me go ask my mom. So I go home, ask my mom. My mom says, as long as you're with Jacob, you're good to go. You're good to go hang out. And so I go back and I get into his car, and me, Mondo, and Jacob drive up to his house. And this guy was in his 30s. He was probably about 31, 32 at the time. Jacob's 15. I was 10. We get into his car. He takes us to a local chicken place. We get a bunch of food, large drink, fries, sides, desserts, all the things. And we are heading up to uh, we're heading up to his house, and we're listening to like AC/DC, Metallica, freaking rocking out. AC's full blast. I got all this food, and I've got my best friend in the passenger seat, my new friend driving us, and my life is like, I'm like, oh man, this is like really cool. Like, I've never had a friend that can drive. I've never had a friend that has a job and has money and can pay for things. So like, I just thought that things were going to start turning around for me. I thought that like life was like good now. Like I had somebody that could save me from my Monday through Friday, that I was dealing with my mom. And because about the same time that I met this guy, my mom gets a new boyfriend, and this new boyfriend gets her addicted to crack and cocaine. So not only was my mom becoming more abusive, she had gotten addicted to crack and cocaine. So we didn't have as much food. We didn't have clothes, utilities. And, I slept in a bedroom with a 3 foot, probably 3 foot by 4 foot hole in the ceiling on a thin mattress, and I wet the bed every night. So I slept in a bedroom that was completely exposed to the elements above. I mean, you could see straight into the attic. There was nothing, no protection. So when it would rain or snow, the water would come straight into my room. And it was crazy. So when I met this guy and I got to go to his house, it was like a light. It was like a savior. He was like my best friend all of a sudden, you know. And I remember going to his house the first time. You know, he lived in like a big studio apartment, and there was you walk in, and to your right, there's an entertainment center with like two, three TVs, couple video game systems, two computers in the back corner, little kitchen bathroom setup. His bed was in the back left corner, and I just remember like the first weekend going up there, we got pizza and pop and energy drinks, and we could cuss and say whatever the hell we wanted to do. You know, do whatever you wanted to do. It didn't matter because there was no parents, no rules. And so, I mean, it was just I didn't go to sleep. I would play video games literally for like 36 hours, and then
You thought
we'd
you were
load up in the
finally
car.
saved, right? You were like, "This is great,
Yeah,
right? This is the best thing I've ever had in my entire life." You know, you're it's like, "Wow, thank you." You were probably thankful that this was happening because this is like a place you could go and escape to, right? I mean, this was like, "Wow, is this really happening to me?" I'm sure you probably thought that, right? This is something you had been longing for.
exactly, man, exactly. And I go home, and when he drops me off, he says, you know, hey, when do you want to come back up? And I'm like, dude, I'll come back up next weekend, man. And from that point forward, it became an every weekend thing. I would go to his house probably 45 out of 52 weekends of the year. I mean, I would go to his house for Thanksgivings, Christmas breaks, um, you know, 4th of July, Memorial Day, whatever holidays. I would go
Every
to his
chance you
place,
got,
and
every chance you
yeah,
got, you were there.
and I mean, I would meet his whole family. So like when I say go to the holidays, like we would go to his family's holidays. So
Mm.
I would meet his mom, his sisters, and his sisters had kids that were a couple of years younger than me. And so this guy who's in his 30s was showing up to like family holiday events with a 10-year-old boy who truthfully looked like a little girl. I had really long hair down to my shoulders. And oddly enough, you know, when I met his mother told me that I was too pretty to be a boy. And so,
So did his family like take you in like you were part of the family? Like you were like, did they treat you that way? Were you getting treatment from these people that weren't your family like you were accepted by them?
you know, I don't really remember how they treated me, but they were just like, I was just Mondo's friend. Like that was just it. Like I was just
And,
Mondo's friend. Like I came in,
and they thought it was
yeah.
normal that he had this 10-year-old boy that was just coming around him like it wasn't odd for them?
Dude, I don't know, man. I would love to connect with them. I'd love to reach out and find them and figure out like, hey, look, and I'm not mad at them. You know, I think a lot of people would be, but I'm not mad at them. I want to know more about the situation. I just want to know like, hey, like what were you guys thinking? Like, was there any suspicion at all? You know, um, because nobody ever questioned it, nobody ever stopped it, nobody ever said anything. They just let it ride.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I think that's awesome that you, for what you just said, right? You're not mad at them. I think there's so much power in your story, in your spirit, and your telling that you're not harvesting this bitterness and anger towards these people when you don't know the facts behind it or the circumstance or the situation. You were just kind of along in this moment. So, yeah, I think I give you props for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, being angry at anybody for anything, whether they did you wrong or not, you're just drinking poison and hoping that they die, right? It's not going to happen. So you might as well, um, I mean, you might as well get over it, right? You might as well move on. And I think so many people, especially people that have gone through the things that I have, they have this like dark cloud in the sky. They have like their like Voldemort, for lack of a better word or term. They have this evil being or this evil force of nature that made them who they are and ruined their life. And because of that, they can't do the things that other people can do because of their circumstances. And as long as we hang on to that, we will always have that, right? And that's like the excuse. That's the excuse cloud or whatever you want to call it. As long as I hang on to this evil dark being, I don't have to do anything productive with my life because I have this pain and this trauma or this, you know, depression, whatever it is, right? So when you learn to like finally say, you know what, dude, I'm done hanging on to that, then you can really start to make progress as far as healing and forgiveness goes. But I mean that took me. 15 years to figure out.
I was going
Like
to
I
ask
want to
you,
make.
that's something that you don't just come up with automatically. And props to you for doing that. That's, I mean, it talks about that for sure. It's that shedding. And it's so easy to like point blame or to find our identity in that thing. You know, like, oh, this is me. This is my excuse. This is my out. I have this problem, this label, this name. And you don't realize that that thing then has ownership and power over you if you choose to identify in that thing that has bondage upon you. It's biblical scripture. I'll let you tell your story, but that's how, that's where I get it from. So the fact that you just found that, through whatever, I don't know, was it therapy that you found that through? Was this your natural course of healing?
No, man. I've actually never been to therapy. I've never had any
Props to
level
you,
of.
man. Props to
Yeah.
you for that.
Yeah, I've never had any formal level of therapy, and I say that as a cautionary tale. Anybody who goes through anything, like whatever your mechanism of healing is, whether it's a relationship through Christ or religion or therapy or whatever your mechanism of healing is, as long as it's productive and positive, then you take whatever course of action you need to take to heal. Therapy just was not in my cards. It has never been, and it is what it is. I'm okay. But I got that last piece from my buddy. His name's George Hayworth. um, I give him credit for saving my marriage. He's a men's like development coach, and I met him through this podcasting kind of um, journey. And I had a conversation with George one day, and he's the one who saved my marriage. And then recently, I spoke to him, and he was kind of telling me like, yeah, people have to have the big bad, the big evil, the big thing that's holding them back in life. And so now you know, I kind of take that and because it was so relatable to me, it's like, oh my God, dude, that makes sense. Like, yes, I was using all of these things that happened to me my entire life to explain the reason why I couldn't get what other people had, when in reality, it's just my victimhood um, was taking over, and for somebody like me to be able to come to this conclusion and to accept it, acknowledge it, and own it, I think it's so powerful because I had every reason in the book to quit. I have every excuse uh, that you can think of to give up, to quit, to become addicted, to go to prison, to become an alcoholic, to be divorced, to be an absent father. I have every reason in the book to quit, and I don't. I don't give up. So when I tell my story, that's the message that I want people to get. Is like, man, I don't care what you've been through, man. We've all got a past. We've all got a story. I get it. Like I may not have been through what you've been through exactly, but I understand your pain. I understand your suffering. I understand how you feel. I understand the emotions that are attached to it. I get all of it. I get it. I know how hard it is to love somebody because I've been there, man. So I guess to circle back to this, I'll wrap up the story kind of quickly here. Um, I was hanging out with Mondo every weekend. And after a few months of hanging out with him, he began to abuse me. He began to sexually abuse me. And this came through a lot of like, there's a whole process of grooming, right? And a lot of that is building commonality, a lot of it's building rapport. And Mondo and I, we built our commonalities through the things that we had been through. I began to tell Mondo that, my mom, I had a single mother, no father. My mom was abusive. I had a couple sisters. I was bullied at school, but I was a really great student. I was a perfect student, straight A student. Um, I began to tell Mondo that I had some like suicidal ideations, things like that. And Mondo would, whether they were true or not, would reiterate a lot of that right back to me, where he would say, I grew up with a single mother. My mother was really abusive. He had a couple sisters. He also had suicidal ideation, dealt with that depression. So we basically began this like trauma bond, and then there was like this dependency where he would say that I was the only thing that mattered to him. And so I would say it back to him that he was the only thing that mattered to me. And it slowly turns into this, and it's a slow burn. Like I think when people think about these things, they don't realize like it's just a very slow, tedious process that they go through to manipulate children. And the people that are like this, predators, whether it's like narcissistic men or child predators or people and predators in other ways, they're very strategic. They're very calculated. Most of the time, they're very patient people. They're very emotionally in tune because they know that, basically humans are creatures of emotion. And if you can manipulate those emotions, you can pretty much get people to do whatever you want them to do. And that's how they operate, and that's how this guy operated. So within 3 months of hanging out with him and knowing him, he began to sexually abuse me, and that went on for almost 6 straight years. And every weekend it was just you're just kind of like rounding the bases, for lack of a better term. Um, you're just every weekend it was just like 1 inch closer, 1 inch closer, 1 inch, like you just slow progress on his part, on what he was doing to me. By the time I was 12 years old, I had experienced just about everything you can in the realm of sexual behavior. And at 12 years old, my mother was taken away from me. She ended up stabbing her boyfriend in the bathroom over some drugs, set some stuff on fire. The police showed up, took her away. And this is like a whole real long, confusing story, but I basically, for about 4 or 5 months, I bounced around a bunch of different houses. I lived with my dad for a very brief moment, then I lived with some family members, and then I bounced around to like different houses, um, just trying to get by. I mean, I was basically couch surfing at 12 years old by myself, looking for places to live. And while my mom was either in prison or jail, I had no idea what happened to my mom. I had no communication with her. I mean, it's truly incredible. I never ended up in the foster care system, and that I was never trafficked or kidnapped or, you know, a dropout. I don't know how to explain it at this point. I know you have you'll have your view, right, which is what most people say, and I totally respect it. Um, but yeah, man, I was just kind of like floating through life somehow, slipping through the cracks of not getting too caught up in the craziness. But anyways, my grandparents ended up finding me right before I turned 13, and they asked to adopt me, and I said yes. So my grandparents take me in, and my sisters were there initially. My sisters wanted to go back and live with my mom, so my grandparents dropped them off. They went back to go live with my mom, and I stayed with my grandparents. And when I was
Real
with
quick,
my
not to
grandparents,
cut you,
yeah,
real quick, not to cut you off. So
yeah.
your grandparents, they weren't around. Did they live in the same town as you up until this time when they adopted you at 13, or were they kind of your mother disconnected from them? How, were they ever in your life prior to? I just wanted to hit to that.
Yeah, yeah. So they were pretty heavily involved throughout my entire childhood. I mean, they tried to rescue me and my sisters since we were babies, because
Mm.
my father, they are my father's parents, and so
Okay. Okay.
yeah, they tried to rescue us from very, very young. Uh, but it's funny. The first chapter of my book is what happens in our house stays in our house. And so my mom would always tell us, what happens in our house stays in our house. So don't tell anybody any of our business because they'll come and take you. And it's kind of crazy how that manipulation from my mother translated to being manipulated by a pedophile.
Hmm.
Because I had protected my mom from everything that she ever did, whether it was abusive or drugs or whatever it was. I never told anybody. So when this pedophile started to abuse me, what did I do? I just followed suit. I don't tell anybody.
Goes to
Don't
show
say.
you how important the things that we say and what we teach to our children in every type of environment that impact on those seeds that are placed and how it'll affect them later on in life. That's perfect. Well,
Yeah, and I mean, we got interviewed by Children Protective Services. We got interviewed by different social services all the time, and we just told them the same thing. It's none of your business. It's none of your business. What happens in our house stays in our house. And so I can imagine on the other end of that table, those social workers were probably just broken to pieces, trying to freaking help out 3 kids, and they won't. They just don't want to give up their mother. And that's a whole nother like conversation. But the manipulation and the psychological warfare that I was going through from 10 to 16 is just incredible. And even when I moved in with my grandparents, um, once again, I had this moment of like, my life is okay now. My grandma ran her own business. My grandpa retired from Ford, had a nice big house, finished basement to myself, pool in the backyard, like had all the good things. And one of the first things I did when I got there was I said, I have this friend that I want to go hang out with. And like, well, who's
oh,
that? And I said, well, yeah, I said, his name's Mondo. And they're like, well, who is he? And I tell them, and initially they're like, no, we're not doing this. No, no way. And so I defend the guy, because I'm on the phone with him and I'm like, hey, they don't want me to hang out with you. And then, he's kind of explaining how to defend him and this and that. And so then I tell my grandparents, like, hey, he's not weird. Like, Jacob knows him, my friend Jacob, and he's known him for a while. And so they're like, all right, well, we want to meet him. And so Mondo comes to my house, and um, my grandparents meet him, and he makes them laugh and makes them smile,
Mhm.
and he's right back in the saddle. And now, instead of me going to all of his holidays and all of his family events, he was coming to mine. So now Seth was the friend with or Seth was the kid with the adult friend versus Mondo being, the inverse of that. So it was a very
So this
interesting.
guy was engrafted in your life, and so by this time you were fully being sexually abused by him,
Oh
right?
yeah,
So and so that just speaks to the mindset of a child that has been abused or that's held captive, right? Even though there's like pain and there's things going on there, like um, was there like I know this might sound like a weird question, but this was what comes to me. Was there like comfort in that pain? I mean, here was an opportunity I mean, outsider. I'm sure you've thought about this now as you're older, but this was an opportunity for you to like completely disconnect from that. But there was something there that like held you captive that wanted that to still be there. Does that make sense?
yeah. So it's interesting. Usually you'll find the comfort pieces of like being abused with like, and from what I know, I'm no doctor or anything, but from what I've known and read, usually the comfort is in the much younger children, because they think they're actually providing a service. They're loving their father, they're loving their grandpa, or whatever it may be. With me, by this point, I was completely disgusted. I was fed up. I was over all of it, because, I mean, this was like full blown abuse, like everything you can imagine, or you don't want to imagine, the things that you don't even want to think about were happening to me every single weekend. And so um, I was fed up with it. And I was, when I told my grandparents that, and I was kind of happy, and then he met my grandparents and he made them laugh and smile. And so you kind of go into this like battle of like you hate it, but then you like gaslight yourself into saying like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, whatever. All I have to do is this, and then I can play video games and eat pizza. This like one small thing for all of these other things. And this one small thing is incredibly disgusting and
Vile.
demoralizing
Yeah, for
and
sure.
vile.
Yeah.
It's just this one, you put it in this bucket of like small things, even though it's something that you would never ever want to do ever. But
Yeah.
that's how you gaslight yourself into doing something horrible.
Was it I'm curious, was it the emotional tie, like the psychological that he had kind of used on you where he felt like if you left then he would kill himself. So you almost felt obligated for this person that gave you all of these other things, this peace, even as for the weekends, there was a price that you had to pay for that freedom, peace. But was there an aspect of the psychological that you're like, you know what? I've been through this. I'm tough. I can do this because I would feel worse if he killed himself. Was that kind of at play with you?
Well, yeah, he he would say that to me. Like I tried to disconnect multiple times, and one of the times before I got to my grandparents, I was on the phone with him, and I hadn't seen him in like 2 weekends, which was like really rare. I barely ever missed a weekend, so to miss like two or three in a row was rare. And he's like, "Well, hey, what's going on? Like, why are you not coming to see me?" And I told him over the phone, I said, well, I'm living with this family now. And this family that I was living with at the time, they were like a middle class family, husband, wife, couple kids. And so I told him, I said, well, I've got a family. Like, I don't need you anymore. And when I told him that at just 12 years old, he goes into this like real pathetic kind of rant about how important I was to him. If I wasn't in his life, he was going to kill himself. I was the most important thing to him. How much he loved me, and how like heartless and disrespectful I was being by saying that.
Mhm.
And so he's like, what do you mean you don't need me? And he kind of goes into this whole thing, and I'm on the other end of the phone, and I'm like, dude, I just want to live my life, man. I just want to be at home with all I
Yeah.
wanted my whole life with a mom and a dad, and a happy house. And I had that. And so I didn't need an escape every weekend. And instead of saying all of those things, I just said, okay, like I'll come back, and I just got like suckered in back into the grips, and so
Mhm.
that's that psychological, emotional like warfare that you're battling, and that's how they do it, man. That's how they win. They make you feel like you're doing the wrong thing, um, and so you just return, right? You feel like it's like punching a dog, and the dog always comes back. That they're just that's just how they're wired, and so children are very much the same way. And that I just kept going back to his house. I don't really have an excuse for it. Um, it sucks that I kept going back, and I wish I would have had like the fortitude to like break free at an earlier age. Um, but that didn't happen, and I continued going to his house. By the time I was 13 years old, my grandparents ended up adopting me. The adoption goes through around that same time. Unfortunately, Mondo ends up raping me for the first time, and I remember everything about that. I won't go into the details here, but that night, as you can imagine, was a like horrific moment in my life. And I can remember being 13 years old, sitting in his bathroom on his toilet, and just crying, and just my life is over. You know, I just been raped. I don't have a mother, don't have a father. Like, why is my life taking this path? Why did I have to be the one to go through all this? What am I going to do now? Like, I can't say anything to anybody. I can't report him, because if I report him, people are they're gonna assume that I'm gay, or they're gonna think that I'm doing different things, or maybe I have HIV or AIDS or some sort of disease. Like, what are people going to think about me if I say anything? So at this point, you go from not even protecting your abuser, but to protecting yourself, because when you report, you have to tell somebody something happened, and what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to do a DNA test. I mean, I would have nightmares about seeing a DNA test with the words positive on it,
Mm.
or an HIV test with the words positive. Like, I would have nightmares about those things. So I didn't want to report. I didn't want to see any of those things come up with my name on it. And so the abuse continues. And then you get so far down the hole that there's quite little and no escape. I mean, you can't do it. You can't escape. I can imagine that's maybe what addiction or alcoholism is like. You get so deep into this hole, you don't even see the light. And man, I'm telling you, dude, go
Yeah,
ahead.
fear, right? So like the fear, this was so much deeper than just it was you like there was this aspect, right? And we put these things in our mind of this fear that we don't even want to face the reality of the fears and thoughts that we've put in our mind that has us in bondage. And you're like continuing to allow the abuse to go on out of the fear of what the reality that you would then have to face when you come out of this hell.
Well, and that's the not at the time, but I would say maybe later in life, that's the fear of success. The fear of success that people have. If you're an addict and you get sober, well, now there's this new expectation. There's this new level of life that you are expected to live at. Okay. If you're
Mm.
an addict, nobody expects anything out of you, right? You maybe live under the bridge, you use your drugs, you don't have any money, you have no responsibility. There's no expectation of you. Once you get out of that, now there's this expectation, because you have succeeded in some form or fashion. And that's the fear of success. It's scary. So as a young man, I feared coming out of this place, because I would have to explain myself, right? If I stopped going to his house, well, why did you stop going to his house all of a sudden? Well, I don't know. Well, no, something happened. Like, you didn't just stop going somewhere that you've been going for 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row. So it really is very fascinating what, like, the psychology behind all of it, right? As far as I mean, that's as far as it relates to me. I don't know about other people, but that's how I felt. And so the abuse continues for a couple more years. I remember I was about a month away from being 16 years old, and I was up at his house, and I had a younger friend that was with me. And this younger kid was having a bad day. And so Mondo had made a comment towards him about abusing him, basically. And when
Mm.
Mondo made that comment, um, the reason why it pissed me off so much is because Mondo would say those same exact things about me in front of other adults. So we had like other adult friends that we would hang out with, not his family or my family, but just other adult friends that we knew. And when it was like time to leave, over the years, he would say, "Hey, we got to go. Seth's going to do this tonight, or I got to go back and do this to Seth tonight." And he would say these things right in front of other adults. And these
Verbalize it,
other
and it
adults,
was wow.
it's all it is hiding in plain sight. Okay, if you and your wife are at a restaurant and you tell the waitress, "Hey, give me 5 minutes. I got to go to the bathroom and beat my wife," the waitress is probably going to laugh because they're going to be like, "There's no way this guy he's not just saying that, he's not going to tell him himself, right?" And so that's how they hide in plain sight, man. And that's what they do.
This
They're
guy
all they're
was a
doing is testing.
predator all the way around, man. He was like you could just see it. I mean, if you're a label, the predator is it. He used every single weapon that possibly he could against you and to put it out there to let you know, like, you're not going to hide. I've already told people and they're not doing anything, right? He's like doing this to you. He's mind screwing you, right?
Exactly, man. And so that method works twofold. It So for him, he's testing the water with people, right? Who can I say this around, and who's not going to believe me, So you're like putting your water in that, you're putting your hand in that hot water, and if it's too hot, then he'll just back up. He won't say that again, right? But if people let it slide, then okay, well, let's keep going a little bit. Let's see how far I can take this
Mm.
thing, because the farther you can go, the less the people are just going to start accepting anything you say, and so
And
that's
the
what he
better
did.
he's going to feel about it. He's normalizing it to himself, right? He's dealing with his own demons in that way, right? I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, and then to the victim, it is a look. You have no control. I've
Yep.
just told everybody what I'm going to do to you, and nobody's saying anything. So when he made that comment towards my younger friend that night, when it was just us three in his house, um, it it lit me on fire because I'd never heard him say anything like that to anybody else, and I knew what was happening. And I laughed about it. I laughed it off and I let it go, but I knew what was happening, and so that weekend when I went home, I made the decision to report him.
Mm.
And I called my friend Jacob. My friend Jacob comes over and I'm talking to Jacob, and I'm kind of walking back and forth my room. I'm pacing. I can't say the words. I'm like, I'm so scared of rejection. I'm so scared of denial because Mondo was like the best friend. He was the family friend. He was funny. He was lovable. I mean, there was no way Mondo would do this. And I just couldn't say the words. And so I'm pacing back and forth, and I'm just like, hey man, like I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time. I just don't know what to say. And Jacob breaks the silence and he says, Mondo touched you, didn't he?
Mm.
And when he says that, I fall to the floor. I'm crying, I'm screaming, I'm punching the floor. I'm just an emotional wreck. Like 16 years of just trauma and misery was coming out of my body. And after a few minutes, Jacob says to me, well, he did it to me too. And I
Mm.
couldn't believe it. I mean, Jacob was like 20, 21, 22 at the time. He's in college. He's with all the girls. He's partying. He's like my hero. There's no way in hell that your hero, like the man that you admire the most in your life, there's no way that this happened to him. And so I look up at Jacob and I'm just heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for him. I'm not even worried about myself anymore. I'm just heartbroken for Jacob. And Jacob says to me, he's like, well, what do you want to do about it? He said, do you want to report or do you want to keep it a secret? He said, whatever you want to do, I'll follow your lead. And I said, we're going to report this guy because he's about to start abusing my friend, and I'm not letting this happen any longer. And so we go out and we tell my grandparents. And, you know, the most heartbreaking part of that is, for me, anyways, is I remember telling my grandma, and my grandma was just, I could just hear her today, like, my baby, and crying and, holding me. And it really breaks my heart because she's not here anymore. And she passed away in 2019. So she passed away before I got to do anything about what I'm doing now, right? And so my grandma, unfortunately, is not here to see the impact that I'm making now, and so that part really does hurt. Um, but we went down to the hospital. We do the whole kit. Police officer shows up. His name is Chad Couples from Bluffton, Ohio. Um, I have since gone back to Ohio and met him 15 years later. I got to present an award to him. Um, at a conference. Actually, the first conference that I've ever spoke at was in my hometown, which is like really beautiful. It's just like
Yeah,
real
it's full
coincidental.
circle. Yeah, full circle.
Yeah,
That's usually how it works. It usually works that way.
yeah. So first conference I've ever spoken at was in my hometown, and I told them I'll speak at this conference under one condition: I want to present Chad Couples an award, and
Mm.
they let me do that. So I got to give this officer an award 15 years after the fact, and gave him a custom blue line flag and a plaque. And but Chad walked in that room that day, conducts the interview, conducts the investigation, um, drives up to Bluffton, Ohio, and gets an out of custody confession from Mondo, which is huge in the police world, right? Getting a confession without arresting them is a really big deal. So he gets the confession, they arrest him. A few months later, he's charged with 10 felony counts of child, abuse and all these different things between me and Jacob. Um, he had abused Jacob and I for about 10 years between the two of us. He had abused me for about 5 years and Jacob for about 5 years before he had gotten to me. And he was offered a plea deal. So he took 4 of the 10 charges. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for 10 years of abuse between two boys. And he, fortunately enough, so that was in 2011. So he'd be free today. Fortunately enough, he died in prison in 2019. So, his story is over. It is what it is. Um, and then from that day forward, I basically just kept it moving, man. I went to the fairgrounds the next weekend, was hanging out with my friends, hanging out with girls from school, and just bottled it up, just pushed it at the bottom, and never talked about it again. And that went on for 15 years before I started talking about it last year. Um, and throughout this whole life, right, throughout my entire adulthood, I've battled identity issues, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, all those things. But even in my marriage, I became this manipulative person that I had been abused by for so long, whether it was through my mother or through Mondo. In my own marriage, I became that way towards my wife. We had a puppy dog, like love bombing phase. And then I became very emotionally detached and abusive towards her for a very long time. I raised my kids for the first couple of years with this like very high level of discipline and standards, for a 2 year old or a 3 year old and a 4 year old. Um, I was never abusive towards my kids or my wife as far as physically goes, but certainly was manipulative towards my wife for a long time. And despite all that, I've gone on to kind of turn a new leaf, and that's the story.
Wow. So I want to get to that, but I want to just jump back real quick. So Jacob was the guy that originally introduced you and brought you over to Mondo's house when he was around 15 and you were 10, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then once you started going there, he kind of fades out of the equation and you're kind of like the main focus. It's like this trading off type of basically, right? Am I following that right?
Yeah, but
And,
that's basically, yeah.
and then you see that happening and this gives you props, right? And then there was also like community in this. So when had you ever brought another friend over to his house other than this time when you're now 15, 16, and you brought somebody over? Had you ever brought friends before?
So there had been occasionally like a random kid or two would show up, and usually it was Mondo would meet somebody who had a kid, and then Mondo would bring those kids. But I was at his house every single weekend. So I saw every kid that would come through. And I can only remember like 2 other kids. One of them showed up 2 or 3 times, never came back. Maybe something happened, maybe not. I don't know. The kid was contacted during the investigation, and supposedly nothing happened. The friend that I had, Mondo knew that kid before I knew him, and then I just became friends with him as well. But that kid was never allowed to go to Mondo's house without me being there. um, according to his parents, right? And so that kid was also interviewed during the investigation, and he said that nothing weird ever happened either. So the only 2 people that reported were me and Jacob.
But you saw that word or that how he was using that, and you saw like, hey, like this person, if I don't do something, the pain that I felt, this person could be interjected to that, right? And then when you were able to connect with Jacob. You had the wherewithal to do that. And then when you found out that you weren't alone in this, right? That there was somebody else that had been through similar by the exact same person, you found strength in the community together. And I don't know in your story, if you hadn't have found that out, would you have been able to confess and have those charges pressed against him? Is that when you found out that Jacob too, somebody you could relate to, that community, you weren't alone, you were able to come together to do that, which would made your case stronger. So just that community aspect that you guys were able to have. Are you still in touch with Jacob? Are you guys still in communication?
Yeah. So, just to answer your first part, I don't know if I would have been able to say anything had Jacob not been there. And once again, like, how coincidental that I called Jacob to report, and I couldn't say the words. I could not say it, man. I was in my room for 5 minutes, 10 minutes walking back and forth. I could not get the words to come out of my body. And Jacob is the one that broke the silence. So how, like, what are the odds? Like, what's the beauty in that, right?
It's the
If I would have
alignment.
called anybody, yeah, like if I would have called anybody else, what would have happened?
Yep.
So I don't know, man. It's crazy to think about that. So, um, and then I guess the follow up to that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I missed your.
No, you know,
So
are you in communication with Jacob now? I mean, is
yes,
that something that, yeah, when you started
yeah,
sharing your
yeah,
story, because you don't share this for 15 years, or 13 years, where's Jacob at in this piece with that?
yeah. So Jacob is he's doing well. He lives about a state or two away from me, but he's married. He's got a family. He's got two kids. So you know how that goes. You grow old, you get a family. It's hard to see each other. But Jacob and I were like two peas in a pod for freaking 10 years. We were always connected and talking and hanging out. Lived with him, and but with families and things like that, it's just hard to see each other. You live so far apart. But he's doing well. He's got a family. He's married. He's doing well.
That's good. That's good. So you bottle this up, you report him, he goes to jail. And I always say this, like, for you to 10 years, right, on a prison sentence for abuse of two guys, probably many more, right? But just two that they reported for the turn of 10 years for any state to even give a plea deal of a year apiece is astronomical. I mean, that should be 100 years, no question about it, right? 10 years of trauma for each year that happened. And it was, I believe it's God's purpose and gift that he died in there, right? He wasn't able to be released to have any more impact on anybody else. So, God always has his way of working that out, karma, whatever you want to call it. But so you bottled this up at 16 years old. I know you joined the army at a young age. And what was it that made you? I know you said you were having issue. God bless you with a wife and kids. But at what point did you was it like, I have to share this? I have to put this out. And then in that, help the improvement of your marriage, your child, your life in every aspect.
Yeah, it's incredible to be in the position that I am in now because I can remember once again, I told you that story earlier, that one day I'll tell my story. One day like I'll write a book. One day I want to get this message out and save somebody. And then at 12 years old, I came across a motivational speaker. His name's Eric Thomas. I came across him on YouTube. He's like the world's best motivational speaker. He's incredible. And I saw him tell his story, and I was like, okay, one day I'll be a motivational speaker. And so once I got out of the military, I started writing my book, and then I got really serious about my book last year, and hence I ended up publishing it. But when I started writing my book, that's when I started speaking. So actually, almost a year ago, exactly today, was one of my first speaking engagements, and that all came about because I had seen another man tell his story, another man who had been through what I had been through. Because I had always told bits and pieces of my story, but I never talked about the sexual abuse because that was something that I was like implicit and that I was like a part of, right? Like I participated in those things. So there's like a level of guilt and shame that comes with that. So I
Yeah,
never
of
talked
course.
about
Yeah.
those things.
Yep.
But I'd always talked about like my mom being addicted and abusive because that had nothing to do with me. I was just in the path, right? So I saw a man, excuse me, I saw a man, his name's Clark Fredericks, and he's got a incredible story. He's from Stillwater, New Jersey. But I saw his story on a channel called Soft Red Underbelly. And Clark talks about his experience as a child, very similar to mine. And he talks about it very raw, very authentic, very forthcoming and powerful. And Clark is this, big like guy. He's very powerful looking. And so when I saw him tell his story and that he wasn't this like broken shell of a man, it blew me away. And because of Clark Fredericks to do what he did and to break that mold of like men coming out about these things and not just like coming out about it, but like being powerful and being imposing and being strong about it. That's what struck me because I've seen people talk about it and they're usually destroyed. They're broken.
Yeah.
They can't cope. They can't, they're just, for the lack of a better word, they look weak. And I don't
Mhm.
ever want to look weak to anybody. When I walk into a room, I want people to know like Seth is in the room. I
Yeah.
have a, I have a level of like authority, I guess you could say, when I walk into places because I just have some sort of presence about me, and that's what Clark had. And so when I saw Clark do that, I said, okay, it's time. And I sat down with a couple friends and poured my heart out for 3.5 hours on a camera, and I put it out in the world. And ever since that day, almost a year ago, exactly today, actually, um, man, you want to talk about taking weight off your shoulders, And I'll tell you this real quick. I was in LA a few months ago and I was up there doing this thing and it was me and like four other guys and we're going up the side of this mountain. We all have weighted vests on and we're going up this mountain and everybody on that mountain was looking at us and they're like, wow, like how much weight are you carrying? Oh, it's 20 pounds, 30 pounds, whatever it was. And it's like, oh wow, man, that's a lot. It's a lot. We're going up the mountain. Everybody keeps saying it. Everybody keeps cheering us on. And what's interesting about that is we are all carrying weight. We just can't see it. But
Amen.
when you put it on, everybody can see it, right?
Yep.
And so now you have so much more respect for these people going up the mountain because you can see the weight that they're carrying. So
Yep.
we're all going up a damn mountain, man. Every one of us are. We just don't see it, right? So when you start to talk about it, this is what I'm saying. When we are more alike than we are different, you understand? Like
For sure.
we are all going through things, man. You just have to, if you are willing to step out of your mold and let people see these like dark pieces of the the corners of your mind, these where you might be struggling, you're going to find out that everybody around you's got something going on. They're carrying weight too, man. You just can't see it. So when I saw Clark do his thing, that's what I said. Okay, it's time. I got to start saving people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, to add to that, I actually, a year ago, I wouldn't have shared pieces of my testimony that I just shared with you on the show. I wouldn't because of the same reason, like you said, the shame, the guilt, all the things that we hold on to, right? And about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I got invited to this event at Turning Point USA called the Summit Experience. And in that experience, like you, we were hiking up mountains, right? We were in Ojai, California, and all of us, they paired you up with a buddy is what they did, right? It was and there was a pile of sandbags and you had to grab a sandbag and you had to put that sandbag on your bike and on your back and hike up and down these mountains. And those sandbags were anywhere from 30 pounds to 75 pounds. Once you picked that sandbag up, you couldn't put it down unless you're handing it to your buddy or someone else in the group. And I'm a pretty strong guy. I like fitness, and as tough as we all are, as strong as we all are, as big as shoulders we have, as tough as we are as men, there's going to be a point in time where you are going to have to take that off, that weight, and unload it on somebody else. Or the weight you have, you can see somebody struggling and they need to shed that weight, and you need to be there to listen to them and take that weight on your back just to give them some relief and motivate them that they can continue on in this battle. And that's what did it for me. And at that point in this event, over 3 days, there were guys, we'd get to these peaks of these mountains after hiking. It was a 15-mile hike total. And there would be these times where they'd say, okay, put your sandbags down. You could rest for like, 15, 20 minutes. And somebody would share their testimony. And it was in that moment as I'm hearing the guys share their testimony and I see guys around reacting, right? And God's telling me, you need to share your testimony. So I think that for you doing that, there's so much strength that it takes just to do that. There's vulnerability. But then I know that you've tapped into this, kingdom power, right? This authority that you've been giving through your pain, through your hurts, to let other people know they're not alone. There's community and to strengthen them up. And you're not doing this for your glory. You're not doing this for your benefit. Those things are coming, right? Those speaking engagements, all those things. It's just a byproduct of your blessing other people with the story and strength they have to stand out. And for you, I'm a real believer in like seeds and vision and things just happening. So for you to see from an early on age that you were going to write a book, and then you heard this guy and you're like, you were going to be a motivational speaker. And this was really before the worst part of your trauma happened, right? You already knew this was going to happen. So that vision that we have, those actions that we put into place, the process that we have to go through, that refining process to be able to be made pure, right? And refinement takes pressure. It takes pain. I mean, diamond, gold's the most valuable things are built under mass amounts of pressure. In your life, there was pressure, there was breaking points, but through it all, you're out and you're able to shed that shame, the guilt, the burden to be able to empower other people and to walk in a light, man. So I think what you're doing is amazing for sharing that, guys. I'm going to put a link in the bio to where you guys can pick this up. Amazon, right? Is that the best place for them to go and buy this, Seth?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
It's on Amazon, and then I have. If I also do signed copies through my website, which is just my name,
Okay.
SethGehle.com.
Perfect. So we will tag that. We'll put that link in the description directly to your website for a signed copy. That's what he gave us when we were at AmFest. He signed a copy. But yeah, go ahead and plug your socials for anybody. I know we're kind of over the time where we allowed, so go ahead and plug your socials for anyone you want to follow. And I just
Yeah, social. It's just my name, Seth Gehle. I'm on all of the platforms. I think if you look me up, you'll find me. It's 2025, so it's Seth underscore Gale, and then yeah, if you type in my name, you'll find me.
All right, cool. And we're gonna, like I said, put that in the descriptions for you. And I just, great job, Seth. And I know this is just the beginning. You said 1 year ago you stood on that first stage. There's no doubt in my mind that there's going to be bigger stage, bigger platforms, bigger audiences that you're going to go on. And not those don't matter because the souls you're going to save and the people that you're going to give freedom to dig deeper, like that's what this is all about. And I know in your heart that that's what this is. If it saves one person, I know it's going to save more. But I really know that's your heart, and I just love that about you, man. Great stuff. Really great
Absolutely,
stuff.
yeah, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you came on. We something we do on our show, we pray. I know you're not a big into faith. I gotta ask you this before we get off. Growing up, would you pray? Like, was there
Um,
ever a time where you were like, God, save me from this? Or why am I going through this?
I don't know if I ever prayed, as in like for good things. I was more probably asking why, like why me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, definitely.
But you were speaking to something bigger than yourself.
Certainly trying to figure something out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have the answer to why me now?
You know, there's an interesting quote by Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called A Man's Search for Meaning. He went through the Holocaust, and he said, Your suffering ceases to be suffering the moment you give it purpose." So that's my answer, right?
Mm.
My suffering is no longer suffering because it has a purpose. There's a mission, there's a vision, there's this purpose that I've given my life um, for the things that I've gone through and been through. So I would say that is my why me, the answer to why me. Um, I don't know that I would necessarily believe that people go through things for a reason, um, as in like external forces acting upon you for a reason. I know that's a interesting topic, but um, I think that we're lucky, man. Sometimes life, you're born in the right country. Sometimes you're born on the right side of the planet. You know, if I would have been born on the other side of the planet and all these things would have happened to me, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have the things that I have today. Like I'm so fortunate just to be a freaking American that, so just that alone is enough luck. But um, yeah, I don't know that things happen to people for a reason, like they're put through things for a reason. But I believe that we can get things out of whatever we go through. It just
Yeah.
depends on how
Yeah.
you want to look at it.
No, I agree with that. And one thing's for certain, I could say that those tough parts that you went through, those years, that horrible stuff that you went through, in the grand scheme of your life, that's going to be such a small part, but that's going to be that building block that instead of allowing that weight to hold you down, you've literally flipped it on the ground and stood upon it. And that's just so powerful. And it takes big shoulders, strength, and heart to be able to have the courage and strength to do that. Your name of your book, Strength in the Shadows, is perfect, man. You picked that perfect. So um, great stuff. Continue on the work. I am going to say a quick prayer just before we hop off, if you're good with that. All right. It's something that we do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to connect, to have these conversations. God, I just thank you for the spirit that you've given Seth, for the strength that you've given him. May you just continue to go before him in all things. We want to pray for specifically for all those that are affected by such horrible acts of child sexual abuse, trauma, neglect, abuse, that you'll just, as these words hit them, Father, that you'll just be able to speak to them in the right way. Give them the strength that they need to share their circumstances, to call out their accusers if they haven't, and to be able to find that purpose that you have for them in their life, to give them the drive that they need, and just give them the peace that only you can give. Father, we pray all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen. Seth, thanks for coming on, man. Thank you everybody for tuning in. If you like the show, make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Leave it in the comments if you guys have any specific questions for Seth. I'm sure we'll forward these to him, or you can go to his website. And once again, we'll drop the book in the comments. And Seth, thanks for coming on, and thanks for spending a little time with us, brother. God bless. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.